Good morning, everybody. What a wonderful crowd. We're so happy you're here today. As was announced, I am chair of the board of directors of the Municipal Art Society, and we're very, very pleased to welcome you today to our summit for New York City. And it's wonderful to see so many urbanists here, so many city builders and city shapers. This is our sold out, and it's our third summit for New York City, to be followed by many, many more. As you know, since its founding, MAS has brought people together from all parts of the city and from all sectors. We work collaboratively, particularly on livability challenges, all of those that we face today, and we try to make the most we can of the opportunities that we have to capitalize on the skills and talents that you and we bring to this. And that's why we're here today. We're here to discuss, to share, to learn, to engage, as we envision and shape the livable and resilient future for New York City and for cities around the world. The summit is MAS's commitment to and platform for the projects, the people, and the issues affecting livability and resilience around the globe. In developing the program for the summit, we kept coming back to some key themes. These are the themes of development, density, and diversity. You are going to hear this time and time again as we look at the various aspects of development, density, and diversity. And I'd like to add my own personal favorite to this, a fourth thing, very important, design. We must remember design. I'm looking at Amanda when I say that because we used to sit next to each other on the City Planning Commission, and she would nudge me and say, "Don't forget design." And she has not forgotten it. Now, you'll hear these words threaded through the summit as we examine the aspects of urban life and how we are stimulating livable cities and cultivating opportunities. Now, before I introduce the next speaker, I'd like to remind everyone of the critical role that MAS has played over the generations, really, in ensuring the success of this city and the success of the places that we love and treasure. Not only did MAS launch a battle to prevent a proposed development in the 1980s from right here, I don't know if you remember, but it was, I believe, Kent Barwick who organized, I don't know how many hundreds of people to come out with their black umbrellas. And they walked into Central Park, they lifted those umbrellas, and they tracked where that shadow was going to be of that ugly building. Well, let me tell you, that finished that building off. It could have been a recession as well, but we're not going to say that. At any rate, we also advocated, of course, for the redesign of Columbus Circle, so beautifully done by Lori Olin, and it's become a grand, grand plaza. And over 20 years ago, we helped restore the statue of Christopher Columbus, and I hope you will go out and see the beautiful thing that our board member, Susan Freedman, has created, the living room. You need to go up and really say hello to Christopher. We're honored today that we will be doing the Masterworks Awards tonight, the Masterworks Awards for Architecture. And for the second year, of course, we're really pleased to be coming back here to this beautiful Time Warner Center, the Frederick Rose Theater, which is also home, as you know, to jazz in Lincoln Center. The culture and the arts are so important to the lifeblood of our city. But please join me now in welcoming one of our summit sponsors, part of the team that made this possible, Jay Cross. He is a true, we just discussed this, resilient and true city shaper, also president of Related Hudson Yards. Jay?
Thank you very much, Jeannie, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the related companies, Hudson Yards and the Time Warner Center, to the MAS Summit. It's only natural that a forum of ideas should be taking place here in New York City, where we continue to think very big. I was actually surprised to learn that there's only approximately 330 cities in the world with a population greater than 1 million, and only 9 of those cities are U.S. And in the top 15, there's only one U.S. city, which is New York. And in that same top 15, there are probably only 2 cities that you might consider model cities, Tokyo and New York. And therefore, our role as an innovator and a role model, I think, can't really be overestimated. As Edward Glaser has argued, the upward mobility track for the bulk of the world's populations are making our choices ever more important. And reinforcing his point, here in New York, we found a way to continue to grow despite the economic challenges facing the country, whether it be the Cornell Tech Center, the 5 boroughs of rezonings, Hunters Point South, Willets Point, Coney Island, Moynihan Station, the number 7 subway extension, East Side Access, and the 2nd Avenue subway. These are all things that we should justifiably be very proud of. And over the next 2 days, you're going to hear a lot of intelligent conversation about cities, New York, and our role in the evolution of cities. And I assume these conversations will reinforce our important role as an example to cities around the world. And certainly at Related, we take these challenges very seriously, whether it's here at Time Warner Center, City Place in West Palm Beach, Sowa Square in Abu Dhabi, or our most ambitious and challenging city within a city, Hudson Yards. And in each and every instance, our desire to create great urban environments comes up against the economics. Costs are generally too high, and revenues in the most ambitious environments generally unpredictable. And so while over the next 2 days, we all discuss great plans and great proposals, I would also encourage you to consider one other P, probability of success. In New York, we have to look hard at our costs, be it construction costs. We have to have innovative means and methods, financeability. We need greater transparency, a more streamlined public procurement process. These are all reasons why our office stock is over 50 years of age. And that contributes to a lack of competitiveness. So over the last 25 years, we've replaced maybe 10% of our stock, while London's done 50%. We have to continue to focus on thinking big, but we also have to work every day on trying to fix what constrains us. And I hope in the next 2 days, your creative and inspiring ideas will be put to the economic tests that we might all truly improve the lives of everyone here in this great city. I also hope that you enjoy the conference. I exhort you to drink plenty of espressos at Bouchon. I'd like you to meet for drinks at our new Center Wine Bar on the 4th floor, dine at Landmark, A Voce, Porterhouse, or if celebrating something really important, maybe Per Se or Massa, and finally close the night out at Stone Rose. Thank you very much and welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome MAS President Vince Cipolla.
Good morning. Did you bring your sunglasses? A little squinting going on, but it is magnificent. Thank you, Eugenie. Our wonderful board chair. Thank you, Jay. Thank you for being a great host. And I want to also welcome those that are watching us online. This event is live streamed. And so some of the set decoration you see here is really for the benefit of those online viewers. And last year, people registered from all over the world to watch the MAS Summit for New York City, and we're expecting them all back and more this year. So welcome to online viewers. As Jeannie said, this is our 3rd summit, and when we started it, it was an idea with some risk, putting forward new and bold ideas about the city and livability, launching quantitative research to support and deepen a conversation about those ideas, and inviting together the widest range of participants, bringing together over 90 speakers and presenters and representatives of literally hundreds of organizations from around the world. We at MAS talk a lot about how the way urban policies get developed and shaped and the way advocacy gets effectively carried out and, in fact, is constantly evolving. Information is so readily available to everyone. You can choose to be afraid of it, or you can choose to run with it, and we're choosing to run with it. And so thank you for running to the MAS Summit for New York City this morning and for being a part of this diverse and big conversation and online event. Many of you were at last year's summit, so you know that this is a dynamic, fast-paced, working summit with people flowing in and out. The number of registrants is actually 2x the number of seats in this room. And through the day, there will be some pretty big crowds in these facilities. I hope you'll join us for lunch and for our Masterworks Awards for Excellence in Architecture this evening. I encourage you to stretch your legs and grab a cup of coffee in the atrium during the summit because other than lunch, there aren't any breaks. This is kind of an urbanism boot camp. The sessions have been designed to be short, to be discussion starters. The summit is just the beginning of an extended, thorough engagement on the issues we know are critical to the future of the city. Whether it's on the note cards you'll be handing out We'll be handing out in the aisles and circulating to the panelists, or on Twitter. Tweet us at MASNYC #SummitNYC, or on Facebook, or in between sessions, or of course after the summit. I encourage you to engage with us on these important issues. We want to know what you think about these issues so we can continue this dialogue throughout the year. Like last year and like the year before, we know that this summit will inform and shape and advance MAS's thinking and our work on the challenges and opportunities facing our beloved city. From considering the future of the public realm that surrounds Grand Central, to harvesting the potential of privately owned public spaces, to crafting best practices for greening historic buildings, to using arts as a tool for community revitalization, to building local economies and fostering entrepreneurship, to the use of zoning and planning reforms to enable parts of the city to become more vibrant and diverse. MAS's work is informed by the many conversations that start here at the summit. We hope that it will similarly shape and influence your work here in New York and around the country and around the world. So welcome, and many thanks to our many visionary supporters. And yes, like last year, I am going to read the list. Time me. I am being timed. Right. Okay. The Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, the Tiffany & Company Foundation, Argent Ventures, American Express, Brookfield, Con Edison, 425 Park, L&L Holding Company, Goldman Sachs, Tishman Speyer, Equity Office Properties, Related Silverstein Properties, Tishman Construction, Town Residential, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the Laurie M. Tisch Illumination Fund, Enid Beale, the Architecture and Design Film Festival, Architizer and Huge, as well as our media sponsors, Architober, Crane's New York Business, Next American City, Streets Blog, Time Out New York, UBM, Future Cities, and Untapped New York. Thank you. Thank you to the MAS Board for your leadership and commitment to the mission of the MAS, and an early thank you to all of our presenters. Many of them have authored books which are for sale outside this room, right near those beautiful renderings and models of 425 Park Avenue, and we'll be hearing a lot more about that from Lord Norman Foster tomorrow morning. Let's hear it for all those who have contributed to these 2 days. Please join me. Before I introduce a wonderful fellow board member, Susan Freedman, you're looking down, I'd like to make, I can see the squinting going on here, so I'll try to, I apologize. I'd like to make a special acknowledgement. Last year at this time, at the summit, an amazing speaker electrified this audience with his passion and creativity. Tony Goldman passed away this year on September 11th, about 4 years after Tony had undergone double lung transplant surgery. I had the enormous privilege of bringing Tony to the National Trust for Historic Preservation Board 20 years ago. And for 20 years, Tony was a bedrock friend and mentor, and not just to me, but for so many. He was a visionary urbanist, a pioneer in Soho, South Beach, Philadelphia, and in the last months of his life, Detroit. He was luminous, insightful, and brave, and he brought dynamism and vibrancy to every neighborhood he worked in. You knew you were in a place touched by his magic. Our family, the MAS family, sends to his family, his amazing wife, Janet, and his incredible children, Jessica and Joey, our love and deepest appreciation for his trailblazing leadership and light. And now, it is my great pleasure to introduce a visionary MAS director, a cultural maverick, and the woman responsible for the extraordinary installation directly outside this window. You guys have the preferred seats, premium pricing on this side. Discovering Columbus, my dear friend, President of the Public Art Fund and Vice Chair of MAS, Susan Freedman.
Thank you, Vin. I am truly thrilled to have an opportunity to be a part of the summit, let alone to introduce a man I admire so much. But I wondered if I wasn't put early on the program so I could explain just what's going on across the street. And in fact, I can explain it. I am very proud that Public Art Fund is working with artist Tatsu to reimagine one of our public monuments. As of today, over 35,000 people have made the discovery, have climbed the 6 flights of stairs to have a personal encounter with this public monument, free of charge. And in so doing, they have a whole new way of looking at our city. Nishi's reimagining of the colossal 13-foot statue of Christopher Columbus, which, as Eugenie mentioned, MAS restored 22 years ago, and Public Art Fund with the City of New York will restore again. And if you make the trek, you'll see he desperately needs that restoration. Gives the historic monument a new life, and it connects the past to the future. Modern life in New York City, much like Nishi's work, is a juxtaposition of innovation and tradition. Innovation and tradition, a marriage, if you will, of the two. MAS is engaged in that same process of celebrating the past, finding ways to preserve what's most valuable and important, while at the same time helping to revision the city as it moves forward creatively, economically, justly, and sustainably. Leading the city's bold forward development is our keynote speaker this morning, Robert Steele, Deputy Mayor for Economic Development. Bob is responsible for the Bloomberg administration's 5-borough economic development strategy and job creation initiatives, leading the administration's efforts as well to expand job training, strengthen small business assistance, promote new industries, and diversify the economy. Bob is committed to achieving the goals of the new housing marketplace plan designed to build or preserve enough affordable housing for 500,000 New Yorkers by 2014. Additionally, Bob spearheads the administration's major redevelopment projects across the city, including those in Lower Manhattan, Flushing, Hunters Point South, Coney Island, Stapleton, the South Bronx, and of course, Hudson Yards. Deputy Mayor Steele also oversees the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, the Department of City Planning, Department of Small Business Services, the New York City Economic Development Corporation, and finally, NYC and Company. Before his appointment as Deputy Mayor in 2010, Bob was President and CEO of Wachovia. From 2006 to 2009, he was Undersecretary for Domestic Finance at the Department of the Treasury. Prior to entering government service, Bob spent 30 years at Goldman Sachs. Bob, we are grateful for your leadership and vision and look forward to hearing your remarks that will give us a context for this summit and for our collective efforts to assure a remarkable future for this great city. Please join me in welcoming Deputy Mayor Steele.
Well, it's terrific to be here, and thank you, Susan, for the kind introduction. And also, Susan, thank you. Let me just join the chorus of thanking you for all you do for arts and culture in the city and for everything in New York City as a whole. You're a fantastic steward in lots of ways, and all of us should take this chance to say thank you. It's also great to be here this morning at the Jazz at Lincoln Center to help kick off the 3rd Annual Municipal Art Society Summit. Congratulations to Vin and all your group on what you pulled together. I'm looking forward to seeing and learning what comes out of the discussions, as I'm sure it'll help inform the administration as we think about what to do in our last 439 days of the administration, not that we're counting. It's also great to be here with so many friends of the Municipal Art Society. MAS has an important advocate for intelligent design and planning and for a more livable city for more than a century. Mayor Bloomberg and the entire administration is proud of the partnership that we've developed with MAS, including some collaborations which are quite memorable, things as the Tribute in Light in Lower Manhattan. We're also appreciative in particular of the great leadership that Vin and his team show every day. Thank you. You know, as I arrived this morning, I was struck by the presence of a new residential development in the neighborhood, Christopher Columbus's new apartment. And of course, the magnificent installation by Nishi was brought to us by Susan, the Public Art Fund, as just another reminder of the impact and the beauty of public art, the latest in a long line of projects which have been brought to life in Mayor Bloomberg's administration, thanks in no small part to the vision and leadership of my colleague, First Deputy Mayor Patty Harris. Projects like the unforgettable gates and waterfalls are just examples of that. Some of you, I just have to debunk the idea. Some people have suggested that the Christopher Columbus's apartment is going to be the first prototype of the smaller apartments that we've been designing for New York City, but that's not true. This is an installation of art only and not a model for what we're thinking about for smaller apartments. So let me get on, though, for the comments I wanted to make this morning. I wanted to try to do 4 things this morning in the time allotted, and I think they're important, and I hope you'll view them as that also. First, I wanted to provide a current snapshot of what's going on in the city with regard to the economy. Second, I want to take just a moment to frame what are the 4 foundational cornerstones that Mayor Bloomberg challenges all of us to think about with regard to economic development. And I hope they might serve as vectors for consideration, as suggested the 4 Ds that I took in this morning. As you think about things over the course of the summit, I hope these 4 principles might serve as a good lens for consideration. Third, I thought this morning I would talk quite briefly about just a couple of specific examples of the impact of the mayor's strategy. And lastly, and fourth, I wanted to provide some details on what we think is one of the most important economic development projects that the mayor has asked us to focus on, and that is a proposal to ensure that the world's premier central business district, East Midtown, remains the destination of choice for world-class global businesses in the 21st century and beyond. So that's the run of show for this morning, and I look forward to describing these things to you. So, if I start with what's going on in New York City, the report is generally encouraging with really one large caveat. And I'm going to tell you in just a moment about the things that are going well, but I believe that before we start jumping into that pool, it's important to just frame by saying that there is the reality that we have an unacceptable level of unemployment in New York City. Too many New Yorkers are still out of work, and that this unemployment and underemployment is concentrated in particular among certain communities and neighborhoods in New York City, and that's why pursuing economic expansion and job creation remains the mayor's top priority. Given that comment, I think the reality is that things are going pretty well on an absolute basis and very well on a relative basis. New York City's economies continue to outperform the rest of the nation. Since the start of the recession, New York has recovered more than 200% of the jobs it's lost, while the rest of the country has only recovered 40%. New York City has created more jobs in the last 2 years than the next 10 largest cities combined. All of this momentum has resulted in 4 striking facts that I think it's good to consider. First, there are more private sector jobs in New York City today, 3.3 million, than at any point in the city's history, having just this past summer eclipsed the previous high water mark of the late 1960s. Second, after years of record-setting tourism results, New York City is now the #1 destination for tourists in the United States, both from people within the United States and even more importantly from international tourists. Third, and this one I think is a bit surprising to people, when people think of college towns in America, often things come to mind like Cambridge, Boston, Ann Arbor, places of that nature. But the fact is that with more than 660,000 post-secondary students in New York is by far the largest college town in America. And my favorite factoid is we have more students than Boston has people. So, with the ongoing expansion of nearly every school in New York, from Columbia to NYU to Fordham and CUNY, the number of students is poised to grow significantly. And this strength of students is a terrific asset in lots of different ways. And fourth, for the first time in generations, in 2010, more people moved into New York City than moved out. Just think about that comparison to the 60s and 70s when people were fleeing New York City in droves, and the story was a terribly unattractive one. So any way you look at it, record numbers of people want to work, visit, study, and live in New York City. And that's an advantage that certainly qualifies as priceless. I don't believe this success is a function of accident, but instead, I'd like to attribute this to Mayor Bloomberg's perspective with regard to a 5-borough strategy for economic development that is centered around the 4 principles that I hope might be helpful to you as you go through the next day or two. First, improving quality of life. With investments in things like public safety, parks, sanitation, clean water, culture, and schools to attract and retain talent. For our economy to grow, New York has to offer a high quality of life. And thanks to a low and still falling crime rate, also the addition of beautiful parks like Brooklyn Bridge Park, Hudson River Park, and vibrant new cultural institutions as the expanded downtown Brooklyn Cultural District, New York City has remained a global magnet for talent. Second, of the fundamentals, is creating a pro-business environment by making it clear to everyone that New York City is open for business and taking a balanced approach to taxes, spending, and regulation. The mayor wants it clear that he will insist that New York is as easy as possible for businesses to open, thrive, and expand in New York City. Third, fostering innovation and economic transformation with investments to diversify New York City's economy, like the game-changing applied sciences and engineering campuses on Roosevelt Island and downtown Brooklyn and at Columbia. And lastly, the 4th pillar of the mayor's strategy is investing in the future, with major redevelopment initiatives and investments in transportation and other infrastructure to support sustainable growth in New York and to accommodate the nearly 1 million new citizens that will be coming to New York in the future. Together, we strongly believe that these principles can build a strong foundation for growth for decades to come. And this morning, I now want to talk a little bit more about this 4th pillar of investing in the city's future, in particular as it relates to East Midtown. Encouraging economic development in one of the world's greatest cities, an historic city, a city of neighborhoods, and a global commercial capital, all at the same time, is clearly an exercise in balance and resolving competing tensions in a thoughtful and honest way. And just so as Mayor Bloomberg rejects completely the false choice between sustainability and economic development with Plan YC, our administration pursues a balanced agenda between preservation and development. New York wouldn't be New York if it weren't constantly reinventing itself, and it wouldn't be New York if our city didn't remain rooted in its rich history and heritage. Mayor Bloomberg flatly rejects the false choice between preservation and development. MAS President Vince Cipolla framed this tension quite eloquently in the first paragraph of his annual letter in the 2011 annual report when he described the MAS mission. He said, and I quote, "The Municipal Art Society safeguards the city's past while embracing and promoting the best city building ideas for its future," unquote. Our administration completely endorses that perspective. Under the leadership of Mayor Bloomberg and Landmarks Preservation Chair Bob Tierney, A record number of historic buildings and neighborhoods have been preserved in all 5 boroughs. Since 2002, the Landmarks Preservation Commission has extended landmark protection to approximately 6,400 buildings by creating 41 new historic districts, more than any administration since the agency was founded in 1965. At the same time, the mayor has also recognized that we have to make room for the businesses and New Yorkers of the future. Ours is an economy that has reinvented itself countless times throughout the city's history. And as our economy continues to move from the industrial age to the information age, so too must our city's built environment. More than 36% of the city has been rezoned since the beginning of the Bloomberg administration, creating the room for more than 60,000 new units of housing, including more than 10,000 units of affordable housing and more than 40 million square feet of commercial space. These redevelopment projects have also reflected the mayor's commitment to world-class design. Under the stewardship of Public Design Commissioner, Executive Director Jackie Snyder, and the Department of Design and Construction Commissioner David Birney, the city's commitment to design excellence has never been stronger, as evidenced by the addition of magnificent buildings and open spaces like the High Line, Via Verde, McCarran Pool Park, and the Queens Museum of Art. Great design is great economics, too, and we've seen in places like Times Square, where after its conversion into a pedestrian plaza in 2008, was recently named as one of the top 10 retail destinations in the world. These rezoning and economic development projects, we believe, have been transformative. Let me just mention 2 quite briefly: outside Manhattan, Long Island City, and downtown Brooklyn. In Long Island City, nearly 2,500 new units of housing have been added since the rezoning in 2001, and today there are dozens and dozens of new businesses, from cafes to industrial businesses to theaters and airlines, thriving in once was a neglected warehouse district. And no neighborhood is poised to benefit more from the businesses that will spin out of the new Cornell and Technion campus coming to Roosevelt Island than Long Island City and the parts of Western Queens. Similarly, downtown Brooklyn is one of the fastest growing neighborhoods in the country, with a population that's more than doubled in the last decade. New tech businesses are thriving in the so-called tech triangle between downtown Brooklyn, Dumbo, and the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And the digital economy in Brooklyn will soon be transformed by the opening of NYU CUSP at the long underused 370 J Street building. So we're seeing this transformative effect of using zoning to encourage and frame growth. And I could talk about these topics longer than Vin's allotted me this morning, in similar success stories in Harlem, at Hudson Yards, in Coney Island, and of course quite clearly in Lower Manhattan, where One World Trade Center is now the tallest building in the city, anchored in memory at its foot by the breathtaking September 11th Memorial, in which Susan Freedman played such an integral role. And that brings me to the mayor's proposal to modernize East Midtown zoning to ensure that it remains the global economic engine it became in the 20th century. Midtown Manhattan is the country's largest central business district, and over time, the Midtown Business District has expanded west and north, now encompassing Times Square and as far north as this very building, built in 2003 and home to one of New York's world-class businesses, Time Warner. But despite the phenomenal expansion of Midtown overall in the last several decades, it's become clearer and clearer to our administration that East Midtown was potentially being left behind. If we went to the top of this building and looked south to where the towers of the Hudson Yards will soon rise, and then further south to where the towers of World Trade Center are rising rapidly, and then looked east, you could see quite clearly that there has not been the kind of exciting new buildings in East Midtown that we expect to see and are seeing elsewhere in New York City. And as we study this issue, we tried to understand what were the reasons behind this distinction. The Department of City Planning analyzed how East Midtown had been developing over the last several decades, particularly compared to central business districts and other global cities. The results were stunning. In the last decade, just two new office buildings of size were built in East Midtown. In a comparably sized area of the central business districts of other cities, such as Tokyo, 27 new buildings were built. In London, there were 34 new buildings built in the city in the last decade. Today, businesses like the financial services and law firms and other public service companies, professional service companies that made Midtown what it is, want new, modern, Class A office space with large floor plates, higher ceilings, and offset cores allowing for open floor plans. Because of this lack of new construction, 80% of the building stock in East Midtown is now more than 50 years old. This means modern businesses simply cannot find the type of modern space they want in East Midtown today. If businesses can't find the kind of space they need in East Midtown, they will find it someplace else in New York City, or more troubling, outside of New York. The average age of East Midtown's buildings is now 73 years old. In London, in the comparable area, it's 43, and just 11% of the buildings in Tokyo Central Business District are more than 50 years old. As a matter of global competitiveness, I put forward that we must simply modernize East Midtown. The potential impact of this phenomena was crystallized profoundly for me personally when recently EDC President Seth Pinsky and I were speaking to a global professional services company about consolidating their footprint from all around the New York region. Without exaggeration, as they came to us and analyzed different perspectives in different places, there was not a single place, not one, that they found acceptable to locate their vision for a 21st century headquarters in East Midtown. So given all of this, you might be asking why the law of economics haven't encouraged development of new supply if businesses are demanding it. And the answer here has to do quite a bit with a quirk of history. Because so much of East Midtown was built prior to the passage of the city's zoning resolution in 1961, many of the buildings in the neighborhood are technically currently overbuilt. If a landlord in that situation were to take down an existing building to build a more modern office building, they would very likely have to rebuild in a smaller footprint. And that explains in part why we're seeing the construction of just 2 new commercial buildings in East Midtown in the last decade. The Bloomberg administration believes that East Midtown, with its exceptional transit access, anchored by Grand Central, and which will only grow with the completion of East Side Access, is exactly the kind of neighborhood in which we want to be encouraging sustainable, transit-oriented development. And so, led by my colleague, City Planning Commission Chair Amanda Burden, who will be speaking about this proposal in more detail later today, and the Department of City Planning, the administration began studying how we could use zoning to encourage the kind of development that we believe East Midtown needs. In June, we began the process of sharing a preliminary proposal for zoning changes with the community board and all the other stakeholders. That proposal was exceedingly specific and we believe clear, but let me take just a moment to walk you through what we think are the major foundations and elements of the proposal. Under this proposal, owners in East Midtown would be able to purchase, as of right, additional FAR above the current limits by contributing to a district improvement bonus, or DIB. The price of this additional FAR will be driven by a market-based mechanism to ensure full value for the city. The DIB would create a fund to provide needed transit and pedestrian improvements in East Midtown to accommodate the additional density of new development and to build great new public spaces, including a reimagined Vanderbilt Avenue. Depending on the specific location, owners would be able to purchase and assemble FAR and build densities between 15 and 24 FAR, with, of course, the greatest density proximate to transportation resources and Park Avenue, which can accommodate additional density. To dimension the upper end of the range for you, the Bank of America building at 1 Bryant Park has an FAR of 24. These kinds of buildings, we believe, fit naturally into East Midtown. Finally, the proposal would also create a process to allow owners to apply for a special permit for buildings to access FAR of up to 30 immediately around Grand Central and up to 24 on Park Avenue. Proposals for these permits, which would have a separate public review process for every permit, would have to meet high planning, public space, and design standards to be considered for the increased densities above the as-of-right proposal. City planning officially began the environmental impact study scoping at the end of September, and after reflecting the input we will gather in the coming months, we're planning to certify the proposal into ULURP in the spring of 2013. There is no doubt this is an ambitious, but we believe carefully considered proposal, and as you would expect and is appropriate, there have been numbers of questions from many of the stakeholders in East Midtown. So before concluding, let me address several of the concerns and comments that we've heard so that we can be forward-looking and responsive to these perspectives. First, some have suggested that this proposal is designed to completely reshape Midtown. That's not correct. This proposal includes a number of safeguards to ensure that the fundamental character of the world's foremost business address is to be preserved. We believe this plan will catalyze significant economic development, and only a select number of new buildings will likely be built in the next 20 to 30 years because of this proposal, as a result of this proposal. Secondly, we've heard comments and questions about the status of landmarks in East Midtown. In short, we pledge to you to take the same balanced approach in East Midtown that I've described previously, and we'll pursue economic development, preservation, and great design all at the same time. LPC has been part of our conversations and analysis from the beginning, and they're currently studying the neighborhood, and their perspective will be a part of how we move forward. And as I mentioned earlier, the proposal will transform Vanderbilt Avenue into a great public space for commuters to walk to one of the most important landmarks in our city, Grand Central, which, unlike many other great train stations, lacks a great adjacent public space. Some have asked whether we need more commercial development in East Midtown, given all of the expected development in Hudson Yards and Lower Manhattan. We believe the short answer is we need to have the option for all of the above. Lower Manhattan lost 13 million square feet of office space on September 11th, and that's not yet been replaced. I mentioned earlier the challenge of an aging building stock in East Midtown, and while it's more acute than elsewhere, 65% of our city's Class A real estate is now more than 50 years old. The reality is that if we want to have the jobs and economic growth required to sustain all of the good things going on in here in New York over the next 20 years, we believe we need to have the opportunity for substantial commercial development throughout the city. We need development not just in East Midtown, but at the Hudson Yards and Lower Manhattan and Long Island City and downtown Brooklyn and in Flushing and commercial districts all over the city. Lastly, some have suggested that this proposal should be slowed down to accommodate for more consultation and development. Well, we're committed to consultation and deliberation and public review, and that process is all underway. An environmental impact statement is currently being prepared, and the ULURP process will provide no fewer than 4 distinct opportunities for review by the Community Board, the Borough President, the City Planning Commission, and the full City Council. As Amanda Burden recently said of what she characterized this as, quote, a carefully considered long-term plan, unquote, and in the months ahead, we look forward to continuing to work with our community leaders and City Council to ensure the final plan achieves that goal. But this is a proposal we intend to see through to the finish to ensure that New York City and Midtown Manhattan remain the most economically competitive city in the world. This morning, I focused on one important proposal within one of the mayor's key economic pillars, but we'll continue to focus on other high-priority projects across the city. For example, we will complete the mayor's historic new housing marketplace plan, which will create or preserve housing for more than 500,000 New Yorkers by 2014. We're working with the New York City Housing Authority, NYCHA, to address its longstanding operating capital deficits, included by maximizing the value of NYCHA real estate in its portfolio. We'll continue to focus on development projects that will bring jobs and investments to neighborhoods throughout all 5 boroughs, including the New York Wheel, soon to be the world's largest Ferris wheel in St. George's on Staten Island, Willets Point in Queen, and Seward Park in Manhattan, which was approved by the City Council just last week by a unanimous vote. There's still much work to be done, we believe, to ensure that New York City stays on its front foot with regard to economic competitiveness. Under Mayor Bloomberg's leadership, and with the support of groups like MAS and all the people in this room, we're confident that New York City's best days lay ahead. And I can pledge to you on behalf of Mayor Bloomberg's administration that we'll take this stewardship that we have today so very seriously and be focused and committed to move forward in the remaining 439 days of our responsibility. So thank you again to Vin Cipolla and MAS for inviting me to speak to you today. It's been a pleasure to have the chance to describe to you the mayor's ambitions and interests, and good luck for the rest of your summit.